ultra and decent, real apple, whole grain oat, and cinnamon spice make every all taste as good as it sounds. Listen to the sound for a whole lot of oat. Come, decent.
Embers $3.99 steak and eggs, 2 farm fresh eggs, 3 buttermilk pancakes, hash brown potatoes, and a USDA choice sirloin steak, only $3.99, 24 hours a day for a limited time. Remember the Embers. You'll be glad you did.
The four-wheel drive from Mazda. The new Navajo. Mazda 4x4s. Even a four-wheel drive MPV. The time of year you need one to feel just right. Factory to dealer incentives on MPV. Cashback from Mazda on trucks. Or special options packages can save you up to $25.75. Mazda. There's no stopping us now. And with deals like this, there's no stopping you.
At your Mazda dealer in Brooklyn Center, White Bear Lake, Minnetonka, Richfield, and Inver Grove Heights now.
Universal presents an inspiring motion picture for jerks of all ages. Steve Martin is Nathan Johnson, humble but proud. Some called him saint, some called him sinner, but all who knew him called him the jerk.
The new phone back there! The new phone back there!
It's an inspiration if you don't think about it too much. The Jerk.
Thursday night at 7 on Receptive Channel 9.
Allied and Iraqi forces engage in the biggest ground war battle yet. While air war continues to target and strike key Iraqi military strengths.
From KMSP Television, America's #1 independent station, this is Prime Time News with Rod Grams, Heather Harden, meteorologist Joe Dandria, Perry Williams on sports, and the entire award-winning Prime Time News team.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
And here are tonight's headlines from the Gulf War. A major ground battle between Allied and Iraqi forces. 12 U.S. Marines die in the fighting.
The commanding general of Operation Desert Storm talks about the pounding Iraqi soldiers are taking, and Iraq may be dumping more oil into the Persian Gulf. But first tonight, the ground battle between Allied and Iraqi troops.
Today, the commanding officer of Operation Desert Storm released details about the fierce firefight. Skip Loescher joins us from Washington with that story. Skip?
The area around the Saudi border town of Khafji reverberates with artillery and rocket fire tonight as U.S. and Allied forces try to retake the city, which was occupied by Iraqi troops earlier in the day. 12 U.S. Marines were killed during the first few hours of fighting. U.S. Marines and Allied troops engaged in what one report said was hellacious fighting along a 25-mile front from Kuwait's Al Wafra oil field to the abandoned Saudi border town of Khafji. Most of the Iraqi armored units were repelled, but one battalion of about 40 tanks made it to Khafji before being hit and hit hard. Some Iraqi soldiers are now trapped in Khafji, surrounded by U.S. Marines and Saudi forces.
I don't think that battle is over by a long shot. I expect a lot more fighting will probably occur tonight. And I would tell you that, you know, obviously we've been talking, and we're ready for whatever comes in there.
Iraqi casualties are said to be heavy, but General Schwarzkopf won't get into a numbers game.
Body count means nothing, absolutely nothing. And all it is a wild guess that tends to mislead people as to what's going on.
U.S. planes continue to try and cut supply lines to Iraqi troops in Kuwait by blowing up bridges and attacking truck convoys. They are zeroing in on airfields and on hardened shelters where the Iraqis are hiding their planes. And they continue to seek and destroy mobile Scud missile launchers like these. The U.S. claims that all of Iraq's fixed Scud launchers are now out of commission. One of the prime targets for U.S. bombers is Iraq's elite Republican Guard.
Today, 28 B-52s dropped 470 tons on them.
The first attempt to retake the Saudi border town of Khafji tonight failed, U.S. and Allied troops being forced to retreat in the wake of heavy Iraqi fire. But they weren't gone long. The U.S. and its allies regrouped, and they are once again attacking the city. In Washington, Skip Loescher for Primetime News.
Thank you very much, Skip.
The White House says a statement released last night by Secretary of State James Baker and Soviet Foreign Minister Alexander Beshmertnik is being misread. The two leaders stated hostilities in Iraq might end if Iraq makes an unequivocal commitment to withdraw from Kuwait and if the Israeli-Arab conflict is dealt with. The White House is insisting nothing has changed and the war can only end if Iraq withdraws from Kuwait. State Department spokeswoman Margaret Tutwiler says last night's surprise statement is not a breakthrough.
When the Secretary feels that he has something to say to you, he does. And when there is a joint statement, as there was in Moscow, which definitely, in our opinion, had new news in it, he and the foreign minister stood there together and read that statement, once in Russian, once in English. Obviously, by the Secretary of State not even coming down last night, we did not, at all candor, view this as any big deal.
During a photo session this morning, President Bush laughed when a reporter suggested the president was mad at Secretary of State Baker. The Bush administration is blaming last night's statement on sloppy staff work.
Also tonight, Iraq may be stepping up its environmental terrorism.
A British report says a new oil slick has been spotted in the Persian Gulf just days after U.S. warplanes bombed a Kuwaiti terminal to stop a different oil spill.
Maureen Reeder joins us now with the details. Maureen?
Well, the oil slick, according to British news reports, is coming from an Iraqi oil terminal. The Allies earlier accused Iraq of dumping millions of gallons from a Kuwaiti facility. The BBC now says a new slick has appeared from an Iraqi terminal in the northern tip of the Gulf. Experts from the U.S. and other nations are in the region to help Saudis deal with the slick.
There's no way that you can hope to recover large quantities of a big spill like this. What we have to do is come up with schemes to protect the areas that you need protection at, and then clean up the oil that gets through this protection booming scheme that you rigged.
U.S. officials say the first slick is now 60 miles long and 20 miles wide. Well, the threat of terrorism is prompting the U.S. Postal Service to step up security. The Wall Street Journal reports the Postal Service has stopped shipping all but the smallest packages on passenger planes and has suspended same-day service. The Postal Office won't give any details. Iran is dismissing reports that Iraq is trying to buy mobile Scud launchers from the Iranian government. An intelligence source says Iraq wants 100 of Iran's launchers. The Iranian ambassador calls that story baseless. But Iran is asking the UN to allow shipments of food, powdered milk, and infant formula to Iraq for civilians. Iranian diplomats say interviews with Iraq refugees indicate people are in urgent need of food. Now, under UN resolutions, food can be sent to Iraq or occupied Kuwait only to relieve human suffering. Sources at the UN say it's likely Iran's request will be approved if the International Red Cross is allowed to participate. Iraqi TV today is showing pictures of Saddam Hussein. CNN's Peter Arnett in Baghdad reports that Iraqi officials say the video shows Hussein meeting with the general command of his military forces. Iraqi TV says the meeting took place while Hussein was planning attacks on Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, other video from Iraqi TV shows the rubble and what it calls civilian injuries from Allied attacks. The Gulf War is obviously sparking a resurgence in patriotism in this country. Hundreds of radio stations are asking for copies of the national anthem as sung by Whitney Houston at this year's Super Bowl. Arista Recording Company is considering releasing the performance as a single. And on that note, Rod and Heather, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Maureen.
It was a beautiful job. About 300 people rallied at the University of Minnesota this afternoon to express differing views on the Gulf War. Roughly two-thirds of the crowd was critical of President Bush's policy and members of the media who have covered the conflict.
CNN is telling lies, and a lot of people in America are believing it. And since this is a capitalist society, I think George Bush is selling lies, but we're not going to buy it.
About 100 people, most of them members of SLAM, or Students Love America, also demonstrated in support of U.S. troops.
Support our troops! Support our troops! Support our
The demonstration ended without incident. Still ahead tonight, we'll show you detailed portions of Peter Arnett's exclusive interview with Saddam Hussein.
And also a military expert will be joining us on set tonight to analyze what the Iraqi leader is saying. We'll be right back.
Got a new friend, bright as could be, goes by the name of Socrates. He can teach me math, spelling and art. Word James too, he's really smart. Socrates makes learning a game when you play with him. He'll entertain your brain.
Socrates, the computer-like educational video system that turns learning into child's play.
When you play with Socrates, he'll entertain your brain.
Solid things. Pride, dedication. Anderson windows and patio doors are built to stand the test of time.
Through the cold and snow, through the years of rain, from the plains of the Dakotas to the coast of Maine. Anderson, build your dreams of solid things. We'll build tomorrow is. Come home to quality, come home to Anderson.
Welcome to another star-studded affair of the smart and practical. Tonight, truck buyers await the appearance of Hollywood's newest star, Granny.
Thanks, everyone, but the real star is my Chevy S10.
The 91 S10 Tahoe. You get all this, and after option package discounts and cash back, you pay only $92.81.
Don't you buy no ugly truck.
S10's a star at your Heartland Chevrolet Geo dealers.
Embers $3.99 steak and eggs, 2 farm fresh eggs, 3 buttermilk pancakes, hash brown potatoes, and a USDA choice sirloin steak, only $3.99, 24 hours a day for a limited time. Remember the Embers. You'll be glad you did.
Since the Gulf War began 2 weeks ago, we've heard little from Iraqi President Saddam Hussein.
But earlier this week, he granted a 90-minute interview to CNN reporter Peter Arnett. And tonight we are going to show you parts of that interview. And here to provide some analysis is retired Army Colonel Buzz Kriesel. He is the former commander of Psychological Operational Forces for the Army. And again, Colonel, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Ron.
It was his job to analyze the enemy, get inside his head, if you will, to figure out what he's up to. And again, we want to thank the Colonel for joining us. But the first part of the interview, we are going to look at what Saddam Hussein says are the stakes in this war.
This war that is being waged against us, is a Zionist war. Only here, Zionism is fighting us through American blood, through your blood.
وإذا كانت لا تستخدم الآن بعض أسلحتها.
And if Zionism is not using now some of its weapons,
فتريد أن تحتفظ بها.
Then the Zionists want to keep these weapons.
لكي تصبح سيدة الموقف بعد أن تنتهي الحرب.
In order to be master of the situation, in order to be the dominant power in the area.
الإنسان داخل الشخصية الأمريكية.
It's the fact that the Iraqis are going to fight in a manner that
حتى الإنسان داخل الشخصية الأمريكية.
are going to fight in a manner that is going to win them the admiration of even the human being inside the American individual fighting them.
وستسيل دماء غزيرة كثيرة.
Lots of blood will be shed. When we talk about lots of blood being shed, then we're referring to blood on every side. American, British, French, and of course Saudi citizens, Saudi people blood, and of course Iraqi blood.
And again, joining us tonight is retired Army Colonel Buzz Kriesel, who was the commander of the Psychological Operation Forces for the Army. And again, thank you very much, Colonel, for being with us. Now, your department dealt with propaganda. In this interview, what was Saddam Hussein trying to get out? Was it a propaganda message in any way?
Rod, it definitely was, and a pretty good one. If you look at the audiences that he's probably most interested in. That's the regional and domestic audience.
And that's the Arab world you're talking
That's the Arab world. However, all messages by world leaders, particularly a leader like this, are designed for 3 audiences or reach 3 audiences. The other one is the international audience. His linkage of the problem that he has there, or his attempts to link this to the Zionist cause, the Palestinian issue, I think is done very effectively from the regional or Arab perspective. He's reaching them pretty well, as I understand it. The problem he's having, however, is with the international audience, and I think Israel's restraint and the way they've handled this has been masterful. They've done a tremendous job. If we're going to attack into this and counter it now, we're going to have to do something to break the linkage that he's established of the Palestinian Israeli Zionist problem with the Arab man in the street. I know in Egypt it's playing very well. I think the Muslim Brotherhood has now come out in strong support of Saddam Hussein. It's beginning to play well in Syria. We've seen it played extremely well in Jordan. I note also that India, for example, there's beginning to be support for Saddam Hussein and his problem and the war there. The